what I talked about, where enterprise AI is currently, survey data and from the people that I've spoken to, uh, previous technology cycles and how the AI era compares. Because you're right, the key to trying to predict what comes next is understanding where are we? Are we in 94? Are we in 98? Or are we in 2004? And you can actually make an argument that we are in any of those.
Yeah.
We can't be certain, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then mistakes from the last hype cycle in data science, because pretty much exactly what happened in that period, 2015 to 2019, that's what we're seeing now, not just in hiring, but how people's approach to AI. Good. And then the tough road ahead, which is realistically, if we want to get this working, but then what companies can actually do to get there. All right, so here's my spectrum of AI opposing beliefs. Obviously, we've got the far right, which is the AI evangelist, who think the singularity and AGI is going to happen by September this year. They do exist. Okay.
This is great.
The leading voice for that movement is Ben Shapiro. Sadly, he's got 80,000 YouTube subscribers to his channel, but he's one of many. Okay, he predicted 2 years ago that AGI would happen by September 2024, and he's doubling down like every week. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening. Good. And the scary thing is that he's actually very technically competent. This is a smart guy. And then obviously you've got the far left, so the AI cynic, who hates big tech. LLMs are useless for anything requiring quality. ChatGPT is a childish parlor trick. So Gary Marcus, I guess, would be the poster boy. Do you know him for that movement?
No.
No. Okay. So he's a ex-MIT professor, technology consultant. I mean, look, he's a pretty credible guy, but he's relentless every day on LinkedIn. LLMs are shit. They're useless, which is obviously the truth is either in the skeptic side or in the optimist, depending on how far to the right or left. I started on the far left at the end of last year when ChatGPT broke. I had a little play with it, and given that I had exposure to these types of things for some time, I was not that impressed. I thought boring and I ignored it. And then obviously the relentless media thing said, okay, maybe I need to take another look at this. So I did. I learned some prompt engineering, and I was like, wow, okay, this is pretty interesting. And then 3.5 came out, which I thought was completely at a different level to 3, to be honest. I know not everyone agrees with that, but that was for what I was using it for. So I went to the far right, actually, but I was a depressed evangelist. The reason I was depressed is because I just spent 18 months developing our little software tool, Perry.
Yeah.
And I was convinced that it's game over for the software industry. This is a pointless tool now. It's like it feels like it's 20 years old. So I went there. Where I am currently is definitely here for the next couple of years. I will end up here for the long term, but I'm just not seeing much by way of serious results at the moment. And I don't think we'll see much prior to the next collapse that we know is coming in 26, 27, whenever it lands. So anyway, that's just any comments on that?
Well, I love your chart from the far left to the far right, because that's exactly like there's people on the far left. There's like, man, we got to regulate this thing right now. We got to just halt. We got to halt AI development right now until we figure this out. Like, well, that's obviously never going to happen. And then I've always criticized the far right people and their singularity fantasies and all of that. And I always thought, it's really funny. Like, I've been living in the cloud in a sense for 20 years because of the Google and Facebook and all of that. And I would never upload my brain to that. They would I would say one little thing and they would cancel me in a heartbeat and then I would be dead, right? Like, so yeah, it's somewhere in the middle. And then also there's a multi-dimensional. This isn't just, left and right. This is
Oh,
also, so how fast is this going to happen?
yeah.
This is how fast are people going to adapt? There's some industries are going to change overnight. Some industries are still going to be pretty much the same in 20 years. It all depends on where you're at and what you're doing. So it's no wonder people are confused.
Yeah, so I won't be presenting this at the next World Congress because you're right. I've realized it's not right to left. It's right to left, and it's also up and down.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a quadrant thing, not a spectrum. But anyway,
Yeah.
all right, cool. So I think this are you familiar with this quote?
The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability of function. That is a great quote.
Sorry, it should say two function. I've just spotted a typo I didn't spot when I did my talk. Good. Anyway, but yeah, so F. Scott Fitzgerald, you know who he is?
He's a famous author from 100 years ago, right?
Yeah, so I chose that quote deliberately because he said this around about the time that The Great Gatsby came out, which of course is the novel about the last period where we saw such an outrageous level of technological advancement, which is the 1920s, which people may not realize was probably, it was just insane. The number of things that got invented in that decade, brand new technologies, was I don't think it will be surpassed this decade. It won't, because this decade's about AI. It was just staggering. And that's a key concept here for what we need to, we're going to see some seriously contradictory things happening within AI. So that's where that comes from. So we're going to see lots of opposing truths. So Gen AI progress will be rapid. It will change the world in the next 3 to 5 years and increase productivity. But that's digital first companies and use cases. Because what is an LLM? At the moment, it's just a user interface, right? All it knows is what is on the web. It knows nothing outside of that, okay? Other than descriptions of what the real world is. So that's one of the reasons I'm saying that. So the opposing truth is Gen AI progress will be a long, slow grind that doesn't deliver big productivity gains in the next 3 to 5 years. And this applies to real world first companies and complex industrial use cases. Okay, so an example would be a supply chain optimization. You've got to get barrels of oil or pharmaceutical drugs from Far East to 3 other continents. There's no way that AI is going to make a dent in that anytime soon. Like, might not be in the next 20 or 30 years, and that's Gen AI can't help with that anyway. So realistically, those are the differences where think we will see progress. AI will change how we do everything, but it's going to take longer than most people think. I think I said that to you last time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just some interesting data about the current state of enterprise AI. This is from November last year. It actually came out the week before the talk at the end of November, so it's still fairly current. And it just puts in perspective how much work there is to do, and that's okay because we're so early on. So cloud software spend, which built up over a 10-year period, all of traditional AI spend, so that's traditional machine learning and data science we're talking about. So that's more or less, that period was really 2014, 2015, 70 billion. And generative AI spend is obviously less than 1%. And one of the reasons I'm so bearish on what it's really going to do in the enterprise is because if you look at what chief information officers are saying, they're not planning on doing big spend on generative AI this year either. It's not on the agenda. Okay, so this is really interesting. So this is the adoption by industry. This comes, by the way, from a survey that Menlo Ventures, their big VC company, did. I think it was 900 organizations of 1,000 employees and above in the US and Europe and Middle East. And this is what they have found. There are other surveys as well which track this pretty closely. So unsurprisingly, ads and marketing industry have had the highest AI adoption. 10% of the survey respondents were doing something. Surprisingly, legal, massive, also 10%. And then the rest are way behind. And some that you would expect. I've already mentioned supply chain and logistics. They're not going to change what they're doing. It's too complex an industry. Manufacturing, only 1%. Engineering is, I think, included in that. So that gives you a picture of what has happened in the first year of this technology. Now, the legal one, I should say the legal one is the most interesting. Because LLMs should be good at law, because virtually every Supreme Court judgment, I believe, is publicly searchable on the internet. And there's a similar database in the UK. So they've been trained heavily on the law. So that one is one that's very interesting to watch. There's a law firm in London who I'm trying to get into the magazine for the September issue. They've appointed someone who's credible as their head of AI. They've gone all in, and they've had pretty average results. They've not had, and they're a big law firm. They've got like 5,000 employees. So I need to get the full picture, but they have published an article online, and they're using it for internal use, but nothing more. And I don't know if you're familiar, but there was a case recently in the US where a lawyer got sued by their client because they submitted a defense, but they used an LLM, and it was several hallucinations in it, and they lost the case off the back of it. Yeah, so let's see. I think my take on it is it will be good for document summarization and law, and not much else. That's at the current level of development. So, but everyone says it's different. I spoke to Brian Trilly yesterday. Like, he's a full far right evangelist. So he's not going to be convinced otherwise. And he's saying, but AI is different. We'll see if it's different. But this all reminds me of a quote from the big data era, which is, big data is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. No one really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they're doing it. So I don't know if you've heard that before, but it was a quote that was doing the rounds back in 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So technology cycles and how they play out. So this is obviously from the book, Carlotta Perez's book, where she details the 5 revolutions: industrial, steam and railways, age of steel, oil, and then the most recent one that we're pretty much at the end of, or arguably it's finished, the age of computing. She argues that the internet was a subcycle of the 5th revolution. So the next revolution is due, obviously, in the early 2020s, although she does make the point in the book that they can overlap a little bit. So do you know Andrew Ng?
Barely.
Yeah, okay. So he's obviously he's ex-Google. The data science that his team created pretty much led to their dominance. He's probably the leading machine learning guy in the world. And he says AI is the new electricity. Just as electricity transformed almost everything 100 years ago, today I have a hard time thinking of an industry that I don't think AI will transform in the next several years. So he said this in a podcast. No, sorry, it was a talk he gave at Stanford about 3 months ago. One of the questions from the moderator was, "What's your timeline for AGI?" His response was dismissive. He said, "I don't really get involved in such unscientific questions." But the guy wasn't having it. So he said, "But if you had to give a timeline, what would it be?" He said, "I don't know, 50 years, maybe
Mm,
longer."
mm.
Yeah. So so yeah, so I think the reason I'm highlighting him is because he's a realist. And I attended Peter Diamandis's Abundance 360 in February, I think, was it February or March last year? That catapulted me into the evangelist camp. That was probably the main other catalyst. And it was pretty much a hype session from most of them, but he was the guy that said, "Look, let's just take pause here and have a sensible conversation." And if he's saying that AGI is 50 years away, that I think that tells us how much work there is to do here. If we ever get there, I'm not convinced we will. We might. Who knows? What do you think on the AGI thing, Perry? Do you have an opinion?
Um, I'm I'm really skeptical. I think that for a well, since Turing, people have thought the Turing test is the gold standard. I think the gold standard is embryonic development, um, which is spectacularly beyond anything humans have any idea how to do.
Yeah,
And so we um, we have this very myopic idea of what smart is, and it's just a small dimension of smart.
yeah. So Altman's definition of AGI, and obviously he set the bar much lower than I think what you or I would believe it to be. His definition is a world where, and I am paraphrasing, so don't quote me exactly, but it's a world where most of the knowledge work jobs are automated away by AI. That's more or less his definition. And I think that's 40, 50 years away, if ever, actually. But anyway, I can't see it happening anytime soon. Okay, so Carlota Perez says it's a 50-year cycle, because the stated goal here with AI is Sam Altman's version of AGI, which is because what we're talking about, let's be clear what we're talking about. For this to have this amazing impact, we're talking about an AI that can automate human decision making. That's what we're really talking about. Okay. And I think that fits neatly with his then we'll be at the stage where we have got rid of all of the employees, which is what they're aiming for. Um, uh, but Carlota Perez says 50 years. Andrew Ng says 50 years till AGI. I suspect it's going to be on that time frame. So this is her diffusion of technology. Clearly, we're in this eruption phase now. You could make an argument that we're here. I don't think it holds in terms of generative AI. If we're talking about generative AI, we're clearly here, I think. I don't know if you disagree, but the eruption phase is ridiculously fast. Developments of new things, new platforms, new applications. We haven't hit the frenzy yet. Then you have the turning point or moral crisis. Then it all starts to pull together, and then you have it mature. And obviously, this is where most of the value gets created, which is my point. There won't be that much value created here beyond consumer individual use cases. Yeah. And it looks a lot like Akil's thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the only thing I don't like about her book is that she says that the economic cycle is a product of the technology cycle. which we know that's not the case. It's the real estate. But anyway, as I said, every guru has their blind spot. But apart from that, I think it's a brilliant book. And this is just a description of those four phases. And these four phases also happen with the internet, even though it wasn't on a 50-year cycle. Although you could also make the argument that maybe it was, because the internet was around a long time before the 90s as a concept, just no one was using it. But realistically, the internet was probably a 20-year cycle. The mobile phone was a 20-year cycle. The mobile revolution, cloud was like a 10-year cycle. But they all follow this, is her argument, whether it's a big cycle or a sub cycle, that's the phase it goes through. Cool. All right. So this is my interpretation, because the last hype cycle was traditional data science and machine learning, big data, if you want to call it that. It's all the same thing. And because there is a lot of the same mentality about at the moment. Okay, so mistake number one. So the expectations of what data science and machine learning could achieve were wrong in the first place, okay? Because here's what we did. We looked at the results of Amazon, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we decided, look at their 10x growth, which they repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated over and over again. If we just do what they're doing, then we can unlock outrageous trillions of dollars of growth. But it didn't work that way at all, okay? Because people are missing the difference between Amazon optimizing a machine learning recommender engine for someone who goes to buy a pair of shoes and then recommending them shoe shine. That's as simple and as transactional as it gets. It's an enclosed system. The payment system is there. The reviews are there. The product is there. The pitch is there. Everything happens, and it's this amazingly sophisticated system. Okay, that is not the same as trying to apply data science and ML to all of these issues in a pharma company, in a food production company, or any other company.
Yeah.
And it's the same again. ChatGPT is amazing, and we can transform everything, right? They're amazing. We can apply this to anything. And that's what I'm seeing now. Okay, so complex versus non-complex decisions, because as I said, what we're talking about here, if this is going to have the impact that we think it is, it has to it has to be able to make decisions. Digital world decisions are transactional and non-complex. I've just given you the example. Enterprise real world decisions are complex and usually involve people, meetings, etc. And you've already made the point. This is completely going over many people's heads, not necessarily in Planet Perry, but outside of Planet Perry. These two things are completely different. They will never be the same. And digital intelligence will never catch up ever, ever, ever with biological intelligence. Nothing new to you, but people kept commenting on this because this is like, they've not heard this before, bizarrely.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so mistake two, let's not worry about data governance, quality, availability, infrastructure, or how we get these, that's another typo, how we get these applications into production. And right now, we don't need to connect Gen AI to the overall enterprise strategy and do the foundational work to set it up right. It's just because the assumption is this, which is half truth. The model's already pre-trained. Because we don't need to train the model, we don't need to do the groundwork. We don't need a vector database. We don't need super well-structured, clean data, and that's nonsense because there's a lot of differences between Gen AI and traditional machine learning, but they have the same foundational food that they eat, which is quality data. The quality of your outcome is determined by the quality of the data that goes in there. Mistake number 3, let's hire a bunch of data scientists who can build models and MVPs. Yeah. And then we got this. He was supposed to be good in models. Yeah. That was an advert we ran, taking the Mickey out of our competitors back in the day, and at the height of the hype. And this hype cycle, it's let's hire a bunch of AI engineers who can fine-tune AI models and run them. It's just, it's silly. It's a black box mentality, right? All we need is a load of data, feed it into the black box, and what can go wrong? Again, it's a nonsense. It didn't work with data science and ML. Then they figured out that this black box mentality doesn't work. We actually need to hire people like Danielle, who've got statistics and math understanding, who actually understand the underlying math behind them, so that we can refine them properly to what our business problem is. And it's the same again. And this is a classic example of AI generated picture that it can't even spell its own name right. There's the hallucination from Damien. So yeah, this went down well after the 2 hype guys from McKinsey and BCG and their AI generated images. So I got to have that little dig because I went after them. But anyway, good. Good. All right. So what does this mean? I think I've sent you this article. This is the best article I've read on the whole topic. And this woke me up out of my evangelistic period. The 2 authors, Arjun is a writer for The Economist. Zhang Dong is a AI researcher at DeepMind. So I love the fact that it's interdisciplinary. You've got an economics guy and social guy, science guy, and you've got obviously the hard science guy. It's very long. It's worth the effort. The Gradient is the best publication in the world for AI research out of Stanford University. Thankfully, it's nothing to do with Stanford. It's a group of students that have got together on the side to do it. Because I'm sure you've heard about the Stanford president that got fired for academic fraud in the last few months. I'm sure you've heard about that, have you?
Well, yeah, I did. There's been
Yeah.
a lot of that in Ivy League lately.
I mean, it's everywhere. There was a big news. There was an article about it in The Guardian over here. The sheer volume now of academic research papers that have got fake data in them, data generated by AIs. This is a serious problem. A serious problem. Okay. So there's some key things from the article that I just pulled out. So it's possible for growth to accelerate, but the fact that all of these past game-changing technologies that we mentioned, we have yet to break the 3% threshold, gives us a baseline. What that means is, despite all of the previous revolutions, despite the internet, despite the microchip, despite the personal computer, the average increase in GDP is 3% in America for the last 100 years. It's never broken that. Okay, you might have some years where it goes 4% or 5%, but then you have some years where it's 2%, 1%, or a recession. That's the average. Okay, so if we're saying that this is going to unlock trillions of dollars and we're going to have a 10% growth in GDP economic year, well, we should take that with a pinch of salt unless there is strong evidence to the contrary. This is the big line in the whole article, because they're explaining why. These things are trained on knowledge that's written down or it's in videos. It's stuff that's recorded, but a lot of human knowledge is not recorded anywhere. Okay, and it won't be recorded easily. And for companies, what that means is the AI bottleneck isn't going to be the technology. There's lots of problems at the moment with the technology, but they will get fixed. They always get fixed. They fixed the internet. It was terrible in the beginning, and now we have outrageous speeds, and it's amazing. The same will happen. But the big bottleneck is what's called human process knowledge. I'll just let you read that. Can I read this?
Process knowledge is the kind of knowledge that's hard to write down as an instruction. You can give someone in a well-cooked kitchen an extraordinarily detailed recipe, but unless he already has some cooking experience, we shouldn't expect him to prepare a great dish. Well, it's kind of
Yeah,
like riding a bike.
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of explanations of how to ride a bike on the internet, but ChatGPT cannot ride a bike.
yeah,
Riding
and
a bike
obviously,
is an experiential thing, and you get it in your muscle memory. And then you have the phrase, it's kind of like riding a bike. It's like your body remembers how to ride the bike. You're not
yeah,
even thinking.
yeah,
I think this is what you're saying. Is that right?
pretty much, yeah. And this also applies to a lot of knowledge work. We're talking about all the jobs are going to be replaced. Well, they're not, because it's not all done just in a computer online. That's not a large part of the business is this. It's meeting people. It's influencing and getting things done. And yeah, that's basically why it's going to take some serious effort to get AI to automate all of this away, and then we all live in Valhalla. So this is this matrix that I sent to you, and obviously these are starred because these are all complicated. A startup, OpenAI, provides a business to consumer AI product. I wouldn't say it's simple, but that obviously is a very different beast to a enterprise who's not a tech company, right? And that can be a small enterprise like you or me, or it can be a large or medium enterprise. We're not tech companies like these companies are. So this is complex. If you want it to be customer facing, it's complex also if you want it to be of serious value internally. And obviously B2B is probably the most complex of them all. Okay, this is my little thing. It needs some work because I'll be this will be in the next presentation. But my matrix is digital first, real world first, simple and complex use case. And in my opinion, the only one that should be even contemplated is this. So your business has always been in the digital world, the web world, and most of the content you deliver is videos or this type of scenario. Yes, you have a small number of in-person events, but you have digital products. That fits nicely here. Okay.
Yeah.
But I do understand it is R&D, and 80% of machine learning projects end in failure. And these AI projects are way more complicated. Don't be fooled by the fact that you've got a pre-trained model, okay? Because training is half of it. The inference part is the other part of it, and that is very complicated. Okay, so anyway, and if you're a real world company first and a complex, you're not going to get a positive outcome at this stage of the cycle. This might be completely different in 5 years, but it's you're not going to get an outcome now. So that's the matrix for small companies. This was just then there was a big deal about this online about ChatGPT. Who was the ninth chancellor of Germany? The ninth chancellor of Germany was Konrad Adenauer. No, he wasn't. He was the first. Then it goes, he was the first chancellor of the Federal Republic. So a fairly simple question. This is in ChatGPT's training set. They have of course fixed it because this made a big thing in the machine learning community. There was actually an academic paper all about this, believe it or not. So that was just me talking about this idea that they can do reasoning when they can't. Okay. We don't need that. That's for large enterprises. Okay, that's just what you've seen many times before. So what we did, we've done research on the types of profiles that all of these companies have hired over the last year, thousands of profiles, and then we built that into a map, and then we came up with the new model, which you haven't seen, which is the AI profiler, which is it's a different skill set. There's a small number of it that's transferable from the previous era, but most of it isn't. It's by the by, and I don't think it's of too much interest here. Then I've got a book coming out, so I was driving people to sign up for the book, which worked pretty well, and do a consultation with me. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, there was a couple of things. So what should people do? This is the data science hierarchy of needs. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for data, okay? And you cannot skip any of these steps, right? You just can't. The last stage has always been AI and deep learning, i.e. inference, prediction. That's always been the last step. And the biggest mistake of the last era was people forgot about this, just didn't bother, and went and hired a load of data scientists who couldn't do anything. When what they should have been hiring was software engineers and data engineers to collect the data properly, build the right infrastructure, the right data pipelines, and clean the data. Then, only then can you do proper data analytics, and then you move to the cool stuff. Simplified version, which I think is better for a non-technical audience. That's the pyramid. And then you saw this last time, Alexander Wang talking about the fact that no one knows how to fine-tune models. This is really interesting. So because my point here was there's no moat whatsoever in developing your own LLMs, like zero. So this is from Jay Becker. He's one of the most senior AI researchers at OpenAI. I'll just let you read it.
I've been at OpenAI for a year, almost a year. In that time, I've trained a lot of generative models, more than anyone really has any right to train. As I've spent these hours observing the effects of tweaking various model configurations and hyperparameters, one thing that has struck me is the similarities between all the training runs. It's becoming awfully clear to me that these models are truly approximating their data set to an incredible degree. What that means is not only they learn what it means to be a dog or a cat, but the interstitial frequencies between distributions that don't matter, like what photo humans are likely to take or words humans commonly write down. What this manifests as is trained on the same data set for long enough, pretty much every model with enough weights and training time converges to the same point. Sufficiently large diffusion units produce the same images as VIT generators. AR sampling produces the same images as diffusion. This is a surprising observation. It implies that model behavior is not determined by architecture, hyperparameters, or optimizer choices. It's determined by your data, nothing else. Everything else is means to an end in efficiently delivering compute to approximating that data set. Then when you refer to Lambda, ChatGPT, BART, or Claude, then it's not the model weights that you are referring to, it's the data set.
Yeah.
So is he saying that we have this idea that model trainers sit there and go, no, that's not a Chihuahua, that's a German Shepherd. No, that's not and we think that that works. And he's saying it doesn't work nearly as well as you think it does.
So what he's saying is that the difference between the models is not that part of the process, the brute force part, because that's an exercise in brute force, right? They feed outrageous amounts of data to incredibly large models with all of these parameters. He's saying that that's not it. He's saying it's the data set, i.e. the quality of it, and the how it's structured, all of that hard work is where you get better model performance. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've seen this one at Zuckerberg and Crooked Sam. I think that's, oh yeah, this is this was my advice for kind of small companies on what they should do this year in 2024, whilst the technology is still maturing. Obviously, hire the right leader. If they're of a certain size, you shouldn't even contemplate hiring someone. My general view is if you're not at least 50 people, 50 employees, you're not generating enough data to do anything with this stuff other than the consumer applications. Integrate the business to consumer LLMs into existing workflows. So that's ChatGPT and some of the other models. I've bolded this because no one ever starts with the business case. What are the key business problems that are a fit for Gen AI models? What are they? And what is the model good at? It's good at generating creativity, and it's a good natural language interface. At this point, it's not good for much else. So what problems do you have where that applies? And then develop your data quality and data infrastructure. For smaller companies, that's as simple as a Postgres SQL database that's set up properly with a proper data model. And then, only then, are you ready to execute pilot LLM projects. So that's basically what my I'll put this into a pyramid, but that was my key advice to people. Okay, that's it really. So yeah.
So I got a couple of comments. There's this old saying, science advances one funeral at a time, which is true. And most, like in science, most things that are now considered state of the art from a consumer point of view, like they're reading about it in the Guardian and the New York Times, and it's actually being done. Somebody already figured that out 20 or 30 years ago, and it just took that much time for the profession to catch up. And so if you combine that with, I have this saying, the center is the edge, which means if you want to really have an advancement, you have to have a fundamental change in your understanding of the basic core of how something works. So the problem in assimilating new things is it's not obtaining the knowledge, it's getting millions of people to catch up.
Yeah.
And that's really essentially what you're saying. Like I had a roundtable meeting about a month ago, and one of the people, he's already been training his staff on AI for the last year. And he said, the average employee is not going to sit in front of their computer and figure out how to automate their job and build little ChatGPT bots. Average people just don't do stuff like that. If you're going to have this happening, you're going to have a designated person in your company, and they build these things for people, and they watch what they do, and they figure out their processes. And so, and then I also believe that the speed at which people adapt to things mostly has to do with their emotional maturity and their courage.
Yeah.
It's not how good the technology is. It's, are you allowed to disagree? Are you allowed to say, hey, wait a minute, the emperor has no clothes? Are you, if some job is going to be eliminated, does the person who runs that department or has that job have the courage to go retrain the person to do something else useful, or are they just going to resist it and keep doing it the same way? So that seems like the real issue in anybody with any significant size team, that this is what they're going to be dealing with, not even the capability of the technology per se. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's definitely true. Absolutely. The diffusion of this through the world at large and including in companies, it's going to be a stage thing, and not everyone's going to be up for it, and it's going to take a while. But my other key point is it's moving so fast that spending money and time developing this right now, because I would say I'm 80% certain we're either in 94 or 98. You can make the case that we're in 2004, but you'd have to believe for that to be true that the age of AI started around 2014, 2015, and that it started with big data. I'm not sure that holds, to be honest, but I can see that argument. And interestingly, the All In podcast this week, it came out, I think, the day before yesterday. Chamath said, because he's the investor in this big grok thing that's just blown up over the last week. He's the main investor. So he's got a very good motivation to hype this. He said, it's all toys. Everything he's seen from Gen AI at the moment, they're just toys and fringe use cases. And the guy, what's the scientist guy, Freeberg, he said we're still in 1998. So I don't know for sure, but if we're assuming that Gen AI is the start of the age of AI, then yeah, we're in the 90s somewhere. We're in the dial-up era.
So we talked about this already, but people
Yeah.
listening didn't hear the conversation. Could you expand on what you mean by this is 1994 versus 98 versus 2004? What does that mean?
So let's say we could be in 1998, okay, which means that OpenAI or Google, okay, because that's when Google were incorporated, and that completely changed the internet from being pretty useless to actually useful. That was the beginning. So you could make that argument. You could also make the argument that OpenAI or Lycos or Alta Vista, we don't know. Someone else could be coming in the next 4 years that could wipe the floor with them. But if you believe that the start of the age of AI was 2015, 2010, even with big data 2012, then maybe we are 10 years further ahead than Alta Vista and Lycos. Which is right, I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not 100%. I think it feels more like the 90s to me with this stuff, because data science, if you look at data science and ML, the difference between that era and this era of ChatGPT has blown up in the consumer world, and that's where the internet started, in consumer world. Individual email addresses, individual websites. It did nothing in enterprise before 2000, just no connectivity. So yeah, but you could also make the argument that Cisco and Nvidia appear to be there's a chart doing the rounds which shows their share prices and the shape of them in their growth periods, and they're literally identical. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. We simply don't know. Yeah.
And the biggest difference between whether it's 1998 or whether it's 2004 is a thing called .com crash.
Yeah.
And the question is the AI hype cycle going to burst in a, hey, wait a minute, this is just really a toy, and we are however many years away from meaningfully, so like with law, that article that you mentioned, I think it said legal briefs used to be 15 pages, like back in the 1970s. And now that you can use AI to generate 1,000 pages of legal stuff, now I have to hire a team of lawyers to read it all and make sure that we actually want to sign it. So AI employs lawyers, it doesn't unemploy lawyers. Isn't that kind of what you're getting at here?
I think that's tough to call as well. I'm not sure about that. No, I'm not. I don't know about that. I don't. That's not something I was consciously trying to express. Yeah.
I find what you're saying to be very valuable. Like there is a cautionary, like before you go invest all of your spare cash and run up your credit cards chasing this thing, you might want to have a little extra caution here. So, your
Yeah,
thoughts?
exactly. And especially given that we know what's coming in 2026, 27, very likely. And it's likely because of all of the ridiculous government spending on furloughs, which that was unprecedented. I mean, I think it's a setup for a really bad crash. So I think, yeah, I would be urging people to go cautiously because realistically, Perry, if they haven't got, well, let me rephrase it another way. I've placed people in organizations, so data scientists or data analysts or data engineers, call it what you want, in every size of company from 15 to 750,000. Okay, that's Accenture, the 750,000, the largest company. The smallest company I've seen anyone make an impact in was Push Group. So you can check this with Ricky.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
planetary guy.
yeah. So Push Group, Tabitha, she's been there for 3 years. She's made a really good impact there. Over that period, they've grown, but they were 65 employees. Okay. Every time I placed someone, an analyst, in something smaller, nothing happened. They left, or that company didn't grow. Um, you have to be generating enough data, whether it's an LLM, a machine learning model, for any of this to be worth spending a penny on. Just the analogy I would give you is this, right? For certain companies, it makes sense for them to build from scratch their own CRM system, okay? But you've got to get to a certain size where it's a minor decision to hire a team of 5 developers to build and maintain that, okay?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. And it's the same with this.
yeah.
In fact, this is way more complicated than that, right? Even though it appears though it's not.
Mm,
Get the inference to be reliable requires people with serious maths and statistics chops. If you're going to do it at any reasonable scale, that's kind of my message. And I don't think people get it. They think we can just go to Hugging Face, download an open source model, or we can just connect to ChatGPT via the API and we're good to go. My question is, what's the benefit of you doing it that way? Because from what you've showed me, it looks decent, by the way, and you've not paid for it. Great. But what's the difference between that and Get Guru, the enterprise search tool, which is $15 a month? Have you seen that tool?
no, I haven't.
No. Okay. I mean, you might tell me wrong. Let me show you a 1 minute video. Okay. These guys have been in business for 11 years, established company. This is
Your teams have a lot of questions, and Guru gives them the answer. Powered by AI, Guru connects all your favorite apps. So your team's scattered, siloed information becomes instant answers they know they can trust. No matter where they work, they get the answers they want and the critical information you need them to know. Fear of the blank page? Forget about it. Whether employees are working solo or collaborating, Guru makes it easy to capture their ideas and expertise and turn them into content the whole team can use. Guru's automated verification keeps your content fresh, so you don't have to. And thanks to detailed analytics, that content just keeps getting better, effortlessly. Now, your company has a knowledge base you've built just by using it. Stop searching endlessly. Get answers instantly right where you work. Get Guru.
So, did that make sense?
So this is an already existing 11-year-old piece of software that you can dump a bunch of content in, and it gives you the ability to, what can you create support desks, replies, and things with that? Is that the
I'm not sure about that. You basically connect Google, Dropbox, Slack, Gmail, all of your apps. So it's technology company agnostic. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's got an LLM on top already connected. And you can query all of that, find stuff, ask it questions, ask it to summarize.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I see.
I think that's a major use case that most people are thinking about doing that's already been solved for $15 a month license per user. That's but maybe you're planning to do other stuff with yours. I don't know.
But the point is that some people are going out and building their own LLM with open source software to index all their content. And they don't know that there's already stuff out there that does that, it seems really pedestrian.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not sexy because it's 10 years old. Well, enterprise search was invented by IBM in the 1980s. It was shit then, obviously. It was IBM. But I think that would be my message. Is the LLM the right tool? Because all of these SaaS companies now are building LLM capability on top.
Yeah.
And the caveat, if you've got companies in Planet Perry that are small, that are tech or SaaS oriented, they should absolutely be building this. They have to, because their customers are going to expect it. That they do have a problem if they don't
Mm-hmm.
go at this. That's a caveat that I haven't mentioned. But I think most of the others, they'd be better. They get more value from hiring. If they've got 50, 100 people, the person we placed at Push Group was basically someone with a couple of years more experience than Danielle. Super smart, super motivated, done a great job, and significantly less expensive than hiring AI people. That would be my overall message.
Yeah. So there's definitely landmines here to be dodged.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Damien,
hope.
it's been great. This has been very, very interesting. I just feel like it gives a well-rounded, bigger picture of what's going on. It also occurs to me there are going to be edge cases. There are going to be some people where they make a huge quantum leap because of the niche they're in or the way that they apply the technology. It's not all going to be slow and difficult.
No.
You're averaging out across industries. There's a sanity check that needs to happen.
Yeah, there's definite exceptions. The SaaS companies have got to be all over this. They really have to. Number one, digital marketing agencies. I'm not sure Ricky, and he's not, should be developing his own LLM. I think it's too complicated. He doesn't have the talent to do it. But what they're positioning themselves is as we're your consultants that can get you AI ready by using the consumer. They're training people a bit like what Sam Woods is doing, but really focusing on the advertising and marketing space. And there will be others for sure. There'll be other digital first use cases that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I can do some research on that. That you're right, they will be just something about it that makes it ideal for this.